Good evening. I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce, and we are here for Subcommittee Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Open Spaces. For this evening, we will be going over 5 bills. We'll be going over HB 85, Department of Agriculture Spay and Neuter Fund, HB 117, the Department of Natural Resources Geological Study Fund, a survey fund, HB 120, Economic Development, Maryland's Waterman's Microloan Program Eligibility, HB 234, a departmental bill, Department of Ag Fees and Licensing Registration, HB 233, departmental bill, the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coast Ways Critical Areas Protection Program, and HB 109, a departmental bill, Natural Resources Submerged Aquatic Vegetation. Going to try to spend about 10 minutes or so on each bill, but we're going to go ahead and start with HB 85. Kristen?
Yeah, HB 85 is making changes to the spay neuter fund so that it allows for voluntary donations to be made to the fund. It would allow for additional uses of the fund. It requires that additional consideration be given to certain competitive grant proposals. It adds a reporting requirement that applies to recipients of grants that are awarded grants for the purpose of serving multiple jurisdictions. And then there is an increase in the fee on commercial dog and cat food that is paid into the fund. So the fee goes from $100 to $130.
Does the committee have any questions, any concerns regarding the bill? We're not going to move this bill today because there are some other additional questions about the chair. Well, I would say the sponsor of this bill has been working really hard on this bill, so we want to make sure we work through it diligently. But there are questions about the intent of the bill as it relates to making sure we actually have additional funds for spay and neuter funds, and then really looking at the additional funding, or excuse me, the additional services within the bill. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could the chair or someone else remind me, does this does expand the eligible uses for funds under the program? Is that right?
That is correct.
Mobile, is it mobile spay neuter services? Okay.
Transportation services for animals to the clinic from underserved areas. I'm sorry, Kristen.
I'm sorry, I just was, and then routine vaccination for cats and dogs at the time of a spay or neuter.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I can speak to the part about the mobile clinics and the transportation services, that there are jurisdictions in the state that really do not have any opportunities for this type of service at all. And so there are providers who are recipients of the spay neuter grant that I've personally spoken to, who pay out of their own pocket to transport animals to other jurisdictions or to run mobile clinics.
Thank you, Delegate Ruth.
There it is. Thank you.
Delegate Tarasa.
I had to answer that other question first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to say,
Excuse me, 1 minute. 1 minute, Delegate Tarasa. Delegate Baker, can you please mute yourself?
Should I go?
Go ahead, Delegate
Oh,
Tarasa.
thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think Howard County might even be one of them. I foster cats in Howard County, and we have to transport them to Prince George's County to do spay neuter. So I think this is a really important bill, and the transportation piece is probably pretty important too.
And I certainly want to be clear about, I think it is important. There have just been additional questions brought to me, brought to the committee about the intent. And if the intent is to ensure that the spay and neuter fund is increased to provide those services, there's a concern about the additional services beyond the intent of the original fee of
Right.
service. So
Can
there
I
are
just-
questions there. Yeah, I just don't want to make it seem like the other services aren't important, but there's just been
Right,
questions
but-
about the intent.
But my understanding is that it's those vaccines when they're getting spayed and neutered, and that's my experience in the over 30 animals that I've fostered, is that they do the spay and neuter. They do vaccines at the same time.
Right, but but this includes the financing of those,
Right.
the bill. Yeah. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up on what you just said, in terms of the transportation piece, if the goal is to reduce, if the goal of the spay neuter fund is to reduce the population growing out of control and to reduce the number of shelter surrenders and euthanasias, there are counties where there are shelter surrenders and euthanasias because there are no spay neuter services. And so that's very, very much in line with the goals of this.
I'm sorry, when you said of this, you mean the bill or the
Of the spay neuter fund, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
okay. In the meantime, I'm working on getting costs that the general program needs to continue to do spay and neutering as it currently operates, and then what would be the additional costs for the routine vaccinations, the mobile, and the transportation of services. And so once we can get those numbers, we can kind of assess a bit more. Delegate Jacobs, what was that?
Thank you very much for that, because, I was on the committee when we passed this thing originally. And, the spay and neuter fund was certainly, the mission, so to speak. And now this thing every year it seems to get legs and wants to expand services. We're already higher, the fee per label than any other state. And if you pay attention, I don't know how many of you's on AELR, but we get fee increases every day on everything that moves in this state. So I just don't think this is the right thing, that we're expanding these services. I think we ought to do a good job of spay and neuter. And if there's any counties that are not doing spay and neuter, I'd like to know who they are.
Not doing them at all or not doing them adequately. I guess as I understand it, you would have to
Well,
apply.
I mean, if they're not doing it at all, I like to know who they are, because, there was a $576,000 fee increase for veterinarian license this year. So there must be a lot of veterinarians in this state. If not, they're paying a heck of a fee to be one. So I like to know if there's any counties that don't have spay and neuter programs.
Okay, and I want to be also clear in that I think the argument again is being made not only in this room but in general, is that the additional services are essentially correlate with the current need and growth of spay and neutering. And so spay and neutering, while certainly important, it sounds like the case has been made, not only through the bill sponsor, but folks on the call, that those additional services would cut down on the need of services, hopefully in the future.
Well, I appreciate
Yeah.
you trying to get the numbers on what those additional services would be. I think that would be very helpful.
Okay. Delegate Ruth.
Madam Chair, could I see Jennifer Bevan Dangles on this call. Could I ask her to address Delegate Jacobs' question about the counties?
That don't have services?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we do have jurisdictions where there isn't an ability to stand up a program in that county. So one strong example, Baltimore County offers, Carroll County residents, Hartford residents, you can come to Baltimore County and use our services. And so as a result, you see people in those counties, they're technically covered by Baltimore, but it's certainly incredibly difficult for them to get to that shelter and to sort of get there in time to even get in line for one of these spay neuters. And I do want to say with the vaccinations, what's happening right now is if a pet comes in and say they don't have a distemper, the shelter has to vaccinate that animal. The shelter doesn't have a choice. And so the shelters end up eating a lot of the cost of these incidental unplanned vaccinations. And while some shelters have the funding to do that, others don't. And no one wants to have to turn a pet away from a spay or a neuter because they couldn't afford as a shelter to also vaccinate if required. So that's just to help understand the conversation with those two provisions.
And so it's fair to say that the additional funds needed would be when certain programs apply for monies, they'll be applying to cover the costs of work that they're already doing, is what I'm hearing you say, per se.
So yeah, many of them would be applying for more assistance to cover costs that they're currently having to absorb themselves.
Yes.
It is discouraging some counties, especially our smaller, more rural counties, from participating in the competitive grant process because they know that they just can't afford these incidental costs, or they know they can't sort of absorb some of the extra costs to make the program work, so they don't feel they're going to be competitive.
Okay, and just for clarification to Delegate Jacobs' question, as Delegate Ruth, you're saying Baltimore County, for instance, takes on cases from other counties. Is that what I heard you say?
That is correct, yes.
So it's fair to say that for some folks, it's not that they're not providing services, they don't have the ability to provide the services, or they don't have like a strong program or organization that can just even begin.
Exactly. And in some of these, especially more rural areas, it is the lack of access to vets to staff these programs. So the thought of being able to have a mobile clinic where you're bringing the vets or the people together, it actually does have a serious, impact in expanding access to these services, because right now the lack of vets is hurting shelters' ability to staff these and set them up and get them going.
So to your point, and I'll let Delegate Jacobs go, there is a need, for instance, in Hartford County, but there aren't the services. So that would explain the mobile clinic. And I guess the question would then be, are there then numbers or information showing, for instance, that Baltimore County takes on a good portion of potentially the region to help manage some of these services? Is there information or numbers or something that we can get to speak to that?
Yes, because it is a competitive grant program, sometimes it's hard to say what's not being funded because we can only really say what is coming in and being funded, but we can certainly pull the grants where one shelter or one county is trying to provide resources, to a broader network and get you that information.
But don't they have information on the opposite about who I guess when they have to report, maybe give a reporting of their of the grant funds, they would say where that money went as far as.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can certainly pull their grant reports from last year and see, who they served.
I
Yes.
appreciate that. Delegate Jacobs.
All right, so my question is there any counties that don't offer spay and neuter programs? Any one county?
Yes, so
Go ahead.
So to the example just given, for example, Hartford does not offer a program, but Hartford County residents, theoretically can go to Baltimore County. Similarly, Carroll does not offer, but theoretically a resident can go to Baltimore. And we were having conversations with actually some residents of Carroll who were expressing the difficulty they're having because there isn't any clinic, any low cost, opportunities that are close by that they can easily access. And so they feel like they're really cut out of the program in a way.
Jennifer, for the sake of just clarity and directness, can you just state, we know that folks can go to other places to get services. What are the counties that do not have services? So you mentioned Hartford, Carroll. Are there any other ones?
It does change year by year. I will be very happy to provide the list of counties just looking at this year's grant awards where there wasn't a program in that county.
Delegate Jacobs, do you have any further questions?
No, that's good. I didn't take my hand down. I'm sorry.
No problem. There any other questions, clarifications? We're going to hold this bill until next week, until we get some more information, and hopefully we can discuss and move this bill. Kristen, HB 117.
HB 117 is a DNR departmental. It's establishing the Maryland Geological Survey Fund to finance the direct and indirect costs of administering the survey, including long-term budgeting and planning for survey projects, procurements, and equipment purchases.
And there are no proposed amendments for this, correct?
I have not seen any.
I think I saw Rich on the call. Or, I just wanted to know, between you and Mr. Baylor, if you wanted to add any thoughts, insights.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think the bill's pretty straightforward. It just creates the special fund for the Maryland Geological Survey, proudly in your district, to better long-term plan and be more transparent about its expenditures. And we have Rich Ort, who's the director of the Resource Assessment Service and the former director of the MGS, on the call to answer any technical questions about the bill.
Okay. Richard, do you want to add anything before I open it up on the floor for the group?
No, ma'am. I believe this is a straightforward bill. This is mostly a administrative fiscal bill, and it helps us be much more transparent with our special fund clients. And I think that's really all I have to say about it.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions regarding HB 117? Questions, concerns? Anybody mad because it's in my district? No. Well, with that, is there a desire to move this bill favorable?
Move favorable.
Second. Second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor to report favorably HB 117, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Anybody still mad because it's in my district? Okay, bill moves favorably. Let's go to HB 120, and I believe I think Patrick's on the call. I think this bill may have an amendment.
Yes, it does. This is the bill that would include the people licensed only by the Potomac River Fishery Commission and the Waterman's Microloan Program. And the amendment, first of all, it corrects an error in that it doesn't include them on the same level as TFL holders on the Chesapeake Bay. It makes them wait a year to be able to participate in the microloan program, and the amendment fixes that. And it also, in the same vein, moves the effective date up to July 1st. I believe it's July 1st, to give them more time to, over the summer to enter the program. And then it also gets rid of the limits on the loans. That current law, they're supposed to be between $7,000 and $15,000, and the amendment deletes that. Gives more flexibility to our BidCo. Our BidCo asked for the amendments, and the sponsor put them in.
Okay. Does everyone have the reprint of this bill? I think it was in your email, in your calendar invitation.
I move favorable on the amendment.
I want to give the group 1 second to have any comments. There is a motion on the floor, but I just want to, is there any comments or any questions about not only the bill, the eligibility program, but the amendments? All right, seeing none, there was a motion to move the amendments. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, amendments are moved and seconded. Is there any other further discussion? All in favor of the amendments to HB 117, say aye, or 120, excuse me.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? The bill as amended.
Move the bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 I think, okay, I was frozen there. Wait a minute, sorry, guys. Any opposition? Any abstentions? The bill moves favorably with amendments. I want to go, I'm going to skip down to HB 109 because I know there was some questions about 109, which is the natural resources submerged aquatic vegetation. Seems straightforward, but I know the Farm Bureau may have had some questions, and I wanted to see if Tyler wanted to ask those questions now so we can get clarification.
Thank you, Chair Boyce. Just some clarification questions as far as how it would restrict current leases and the harvesting of the submerged aquatic vegetation and how that would currently affect them and their ability to take that.
Well, you should note that in the current law specifically excludes the harvesting of fish, shellfish, or crabs from this section of law. And if you're thinking about the conflicts between harvesters or aquaculturists and submerged aquatic vegetation, that was taken care of a few years ago. DNR basically handles it on a case-by-case basis. This bill doesn't have anything to do with that.
Tyler, you're muted.
Oh, I saw Dylan had his hand raised.
I just wanted to have you respond and then go to Dylan.
So the concern would be specifically with your oyster leases and aquaculture. So you're saying that has been handled.
It's under current law. It's excluded from this.
Okay, and this does not currently change any of the current law.
Well, not related to the exclusion, no.
Okay.
Dylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just agreeing with Patrick, and we also actually have that authorization in current law was actually it was supposed to sunset this year. So we have a DNR departmental that was not introduced in the House, but it's Senate Bill 301 that is a sunset extension on that provision as well. So that is Senate Bill 301, but it's not. We don't have a House crossfile for that one.
You're talking about a bill to extend the sunset on the conflicts bill?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem. There are any other questions? Delegate Jacobs.
Wait a minute, let me lower my hand here. There we go. So this bill is really the trim and just take a pair of scissors to the no more than say 20 feet for access in the marinas and things of that nature. Basically, that's what this bill's for, right?
Boating access, as I understand it.
Yeah, it's I think it's nothing wider than 20 feet, and it's really just trimming and taking a piece of scissors down there and trimming it up instead of pulling it out by the roots. Is that right?
That's correct, and that would be a non-reporting or permission if you're just trimming anything 20 feet and 20 feet wide and below. Anything above 20 feet, you need to talk to DNR to get permission to do so.
But that has no bearing on any of the aquaculture or natural oyster bars whatsoever.
No. It's boating access, as I understand it.
All right, move the bill.
Oh, okay. Are there any other questions, any other concerns? Motions on the floor to move the bill? Is there a second? There's a second. All in favor of moving a bill favorable, say aye.
Aye.
No problem. Bill moves favorable.
And Madam Chair, just to let the subcommittee know, the Senate crossfile is also favorable on third reader.
Oh, thank you. All right, with that, let's go into HB 234. Kristen, we're going to review this one. It's the Department of Ag License Regulation Fees, Penalties, and Regulations.
Yeah, and so it's a departmental bill, and it is making changes to several programs under MDA. First, relating to the Maryland Horse Industry Board, it alters and establishes license renewal and reinstatement requirements for horse establishments, and it including authorizing the board to establish late and reinstatement fees. For beekeepers, it establishes administrative penalties for beekeepers who fail to register with MDA or provide movable frames for a bee colony in a timely manner. For nutrient management plans, it alters the administrative penalty structure for failure to file a nutrient management plan summary report or an annual implementation report. It alters the renewal process for the registration of weights and measures, and it repeals the existing statutory fee structures for registration of weights and measures, and instead requires the secretary to set fees by regulation in an amount to produce funds to approximate the cost of registering each weights and measure. That's it.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was going to ask, are there any questions or clarifications about this bill? It is straightforward, but I know there was some confusion during the hearing about weights and measures as it relates to the Department of Ag's I guess authority over potentially now EV inspections, EV station or charger inspections. I got that right, Kristen?
Yeah, the question came up. I'm not sure where it was resolved, but I think was one of the part of the department's testimony is that they are getting complaints about these systems. But this is addressing all the weights and measures fees.
Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I just pertaining to what Kristen was just mentioning, there may or may not be a forthcoming bill dealing with that as well, with the Department of Ag's responsibility or whose responsibility that actually is.
Right. They were talking about the comptroller's responsibilities versus the Department of Ag's responsibilities, if I remember correctly.
And the PSC is in the mix too, so
yes,
that's gonna be fun.
Mm-hmm. Were there any concerns about some of the changes made? I know with the beekeeper portion, it was there is no fee to register, but there is a fee or a penalty if you are found that you did not register. So I didn't know if there was questions or the need for clarification in that regard. No. No discussions. No concerns. Okay. Well, in that case, we will hold this bill till next week and then decide to make a decision on it. The bill I want us to discuss and go over is HB 233. That's going to take a little time, and I think it's our last bill. Thank you guys for your good work. I see Eric and Kate here. If you could use this time, I would say around 10 minutes to discuss the bill, essentially what it does, what you're looking to change as far as the amendments and really addressing the fiscal note.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And
appreciate this opportunity again to speak with you all. Just again, a quick recap from the hearing. The bill essentially does three things. It incorporates climate readiness, climate resilience into the considerations of the State Critical Area Commission in its decision-making, as well as the local critical area programs. It does the same for equity considerations. And then thirdly, it contains a series of administrative changes that we believe will improve the efficiency and frankly, the experience, both for local implementers as well as the public who interact with the commission on various topics. And we can certainly get into any of those that the subcommittee has questions about. Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can start with the amendments. Do you want me to walk through the reprint in order?
Absolutely. Do we want to put that up? Patrick, or I can pull it up and I can see if I can
I
pull it
think
up.
Leslie should have it.
Yeah, we do have it. Leslie, do you want to share that, please? The reprint for HB
Sure.
233. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, do we also have that or?
Yes, it should be in your calendar invitation. We always send the calendar invitation, and if there are any documents, they should be attached. If it's not, please let me know.
I'm not seeing any attached, but it might be what
It
happened.
should be attached to the most recent one. Sometimes if you only accept the first invitation, it doesn't update with the attachments. But I can also
Okay, thank you. And I mean, I have it here. Sorry.
Does everyone have it? Whenever you're ready, Eric.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So the first amendment, it begins on it's on page 8 of the legislation. And this is to strike a single word, and that word is permanent, and it's under the definition of dwelling unit. So line 21, or excuse me, line 22. The definition begins on line 21, and it simply eliminates the need to determine what is a permanent provision for sanitation, cooking, eating, sleeping, and other activities, rather than those provisions in general. While this amendment was offered by the commission, it was requested by our local jurisdictions to ease implementation. They had a lot of them would get tripped up over that word and interpreting exactly what that word means. So we are proposing to remove it. The second amendment the second place we have amendments is page 17 of the legislation, beginning on line 12. Okay, so we have a local assistance fund that we can pass through for jurisdictions to help with implementation of their local programs. This bill would extend our ability to use that local assistance fund and any additional funds that come our way to help fund the updates for climate and equity that are being introduced by the legislation. The original version of the bill said that applications for that assistance would have to come in by May 1st of each year. It set a hard deadline. At the request of the Maryland Association of Counties, we want to provide some flexibility there. So this amendment would allow an extension to that grant submission deadline at the discretion of the chair. And we expect that we should be able to grant those in most cases. And we have an entire fiscal year to move those funds. The third set of amendments, these start to get a little bit more involved. Pages 22 and 23. So page 22 beginning on around line 28. Okay. Edit down just a little bit. Yep, there we go. Okay, so this piece of the legislation has to do with accessory dwelling units. As mentioned in the hearing, accessory dwelling units are already permitted within the critical area should a local jurisdiction choose to permit them, given some certain guidelines. And those guidelines are what you see here in 1 and 2. We are proposing, again, in coordination with the Maryland Association of Counties, to strike this one provision regarding a requirement that both the primary unit and the accessory unit are served by the same sewage disposal system. In some cases, that is very difficult, but we think functionally it won't change sort of the volume of ADUs that you would see to any significant degree. It would largely just ease local implementation. And that happens both there on page 22 and then again on page 23. We have to do a similar deletion. The next amendment appears on page 25. We have a couple of amendments on page 25, beginning in line 14.
Eric, can you say where the change was again on 23? I'm
On
sorry.
page 23, I believe it's line 2.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so on page 25, starting on line 14. So this whole piece has to do with the local program updates. So in our existing law, local jurisdiction is supposed to update their comprehensive critical area program. These are not their comprehensive plans, but their critical area programs every 6 years. We've had, frankly, a lot of difficulty with local jurisdictions meeting that deadline. The Department of Planning experienced the same thing with comprehensive plans some years ago. And so they gave jurisdictions more time. They moved from 6 years to 10. We want to mirror that process. We also want to mirror the backstops that the state introduced when they gave the local jurisdictions an extra 4 years. And so we have 2 backstops in this bill. And the first one is on this page. And that is in line 18. Any jurisdiction that doesn't meet the deadline or the extension that I'll get back to in a second will not be able to do piecemeal updates. In other words, piecemeal amendments to their program will be frozen until they do the full update that is expected in the law. So that's the way it was proposed to work. The way that we are proposing to amend, so you're going from 6 to 10, we originally said we can grant you 2 6-month extensions. So you could go 10.5 years and then you could go to 11 years for good cause. Mako said, you know what? We are okay with updating these programs, but we just need a little bit more time, especially in this first round. There are 16 counties and 40-something municipalities that have to come in and do these updates. They just want to make sure they do them right, they do them well. And so couple things. First, in line 14 through 17, we are amending it to say instead of the commission granting 2 6-month extensions, the local jurisdiction can automatically request and receive 1 1-year extension. So the total amount of time is the same. It's just they only have to ask once, and it's an automatic thing. It's not our call. It's their call. It's 1 year. Honestly, the relationships we have with the vast majority of our jurisdictions, we trust them. So we believe that is appropriate. The second piece of this, again, in the spirit of giving folks an adequate time to do a good job, begins in line 18. This is that first backstop I talked about, where they can't do piecemeal updates if they blow both the 10 years and the extension. We're going to freeze those piecemeal updates, but we're not going to freeze them for 3 years, essentially. On or after January 1st, 2028, we would begin implementing that backstop. And that's connected to another amendment that you'll see later on. So unfortunately, these pieces are in 2 different places in the bill, but hopefully when we get to that last amendment, it'll all kind of make sense. Moving forward to page 26, line 12. That's where it begins. So another thing we wanted to do in the legislation was clarify how the commission, the state commission, processes a local finding that a mistake was made in the mapping of the critical area. This question, what is the state's role, was the subject of a court decision in Maryland some years ago. And we haven't had an opportunity until now that we're doing a comprehensive update to incorporate the results of that court decision. We made a good faith effort with the original draft of the bill, but we are proposing this amended language to be abundantly clear and best aligned with that court decision. So this amendment does not substantively change what we were trying to do as the bill is introduced, but it provides a little bit more specificity of language going forward. The amendment after that is page 30. beginning in line 19. Okay, this is the other backstop. So we're back to local program updates. And this piece concerns what happens if the 10 years goes by, the extension goes by, and the freeze on the piecemeal updates does not trigger the full comprehensive update. The original legislation proposed that after that one additional year, so we let things go another year, that the commission itself can come in and update the local program. The Association of Counties again said, hey, I think especially in this initial round, we need a little bit more time and we need to make sure that we're notified before that happens. So this amendment does both of those things. It says 2 years after the extension expires, the commission can come in and update the local program rather than 1. And over that intervening time, the commission needs to make sure that it's notifying local jurisdiction on a routine basis that they are falling farther and farther away from the deadline. So we would have to notify them and document that notification at least 4 times over the 3 years from the initial 10-year period until the extension and this additional time expires. So when you add all of these local program update timeframes together, what you end up with is 4 additional years from 6 to 10 to do the program updates, 1 additional year at the discretion of the local jurisdiction for an extension, and then 2 additional years before the commission can come in and do it themselves. We honestly hope to never, ever have to use that. And when we talk about the fiscal note, I can talk about a little bit the ways that we can help make sure that doesn't happen. But it's important to be there, I think, just to make sure that it all gets done. The final amendment that we have is on page 32, line 3. So this is a simple, straightforward amendment that strikes, as you can see, the Secretary of the Environment in terms of consulting with the Commission under our federal coastal zone management program. So when a federal program comes in, they are not subject to the critical area laws the same way that a state or local or private project would be. They go through the federal consistency review process, which is an interagency process. The Department of Natural Resources requested this amendment to strike the Secretary of the Environment to better reflect how that federal consistency review plays out in an interagency fashion. It's more than just environment. And since the Commission, for administrative purposes, is housed in DNR, we feel it's cleaner simply to reference the Secretary of DNR in our legislation. Of course, MDE will still be involved in that consistency review. And with that, Madam Chair, that covers the amendments.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give opportunity to reflect on the amendments, and then I'd like to go into the fiscal note. Delegate Tarasa.
Sorry. I was just curious, and I'm looking for, I now can't find it. I think it was on page 23. What the difficulty of doing the same sewer system as for the ADUs?
Thank you for the question, Delegate. I'm going to turn to the person on here who has a lot more experience implementing this provision than I do, and ask if Ms. Charbonneau could address your question.
Absolutely. Mainly it relates to how health departments consider what is part of a septic system, which is many parts, and whether or not, if you need to do a second septic reserve area, they would consider that part of the same system or not. And what we've learned in meeting with our local jurisdictions is that the health departments in different counties look at that differently. The end result is that when local is looking to see about adding a accessory dwelling unit and they have to look at the number of bedrooms, they have to size their septic system properly. They have to be able to perk. And so it seemed inappropriate to have this limitation in place when really the health departments are the experts on properly providing, septic and meeting those requirements.
We wanted to make it clearer that we're just looking at the location and the size of the accessory dwelling units as it relates to the density requirements within the resource conservation area. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Are there any other questions for Eric or Kate? Delegate Terasa, your face looks complex, like, you know quite another
Nope,
questions.
sorry, I
You're
meant
just
to lower my
thinking too
hand.
hard. You're thinking too
I'm
hard.
thinking too hard, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, Eric, if you want to address the fiscal note.
Yes, absolutely. And I got to note my connection's a little bit unstable, so I apologize if I break in and out.
I think it's me too, so
but
don't worry.
okay. The state or the fiscal note, I think two major areas. First, the impact on state government and then the impact on local government. So I'll address each of those separately. I think on the state side, the fiscal note mentioned that a reliable estimate cannot be made. And so in terms of filling out that answer a little bit, Commission went back and looked at what we know. And fortunately, the state projects are where we have the most amount of experience in terms of fiscal impact. As the fiscal note mentioned, the larger projects already go through CoSmart. CoSmart is, again, an interagency process that is meant to import many of these climate considerations that we're talking about in the legislation. The CAC is a member of the CoSmart consortium within state government. And as a member of CoSmart, we have never been presented with evidence that the CoSmart process is meaningfully increasing the cost of these projects in a manner that would be problematic. We view CoSmart as a good model for reviewing state projects under this legislation, and so we would expect a similar experience than we've had so far from a fiscal perspective. In terms of the remainder of the state projects that are not covered by CoSmart, we already look at those. Through an executive order that was addressed to the CAC in 2012, we have made rules that govern climate considerations specifically for state projects. So all of the state projects that come to the CAC go through an existing regulatory framework. And again, we have not received feedback that this is increasing costs in a manner that is prohibitive or problematic for the state. So that's what I would offer on the state side is the 10 years of experience that we've had applying rules, regulations, and practice that we would plan on continuing to follow should this bill become law. I think the bigger consideration, honestly, in terms of what's new is the local side of all of this. And we've worked extensively with the Maryland Association of Counties for several months now on this legislation. And the cost has not come up as an issue from MACO as a whole. They have said we need time. They have not said we need more money. So I think that's one thing, but we do know that every jurisdiction is in a different place. And where there are jurisdictions that are positioned similarly to those that were mentioned in the fiscal note, we went back and looked at our local assistance fund to see if we could prioritize that out so that we can get to these jurisdictions. And because we're giving local jurisdictions more time to integrate this, we believe that we can get to every one of those local jurisdictions before their deadline comes up to be able to provide them with some assistance. And I would note that especially on the local side, we're talking about soft costs, not hard costs here. So it's not money for infrastructure. It's money for planning. It's money for mapping. It's money for ordinance construction. And all of those tasks are things that the commission and the commission staff have extensive experience providing to local jurisdictions. We expect to produce a model ordinance. We expect to help local jurisdictions with their mapping. These are not costs that these jurisdictions are going to have to bear on their own. So we believe we can offset the vast majority of that local impact, one, through the cash from a local assistance fund over time, over a period of years, and two, through a lot of that technical assistance that makes up the soft costs you see in the fiscal note.
Eric, thank you so much. That was incredibly thorough. And what I'm also hearing too is that potentially for locals who don't even have the capacity, that technical assistance is provided.
Absolutely.
Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Eric, your explanation of how the financial impacts would be minimized makes a lot of sense to me. One question though, the fiscal note in the local effect refers to capital expenditures. It says administrative and capital expenditures may increase. Do you know what the capital side of the equation would be?
Yes, Delegate, I believe the capital side would incorporate local public projects that we directly review as the commission. So as I mentioned previously, state public projects already come through the commission. They already run through this process. Local projects come to the commission, but they don't run through this climate process. Now, what I would say to that is that we would treat them equitably and consistently. So we would expect a similar effect that we see on the state projects on the local projects. So I would hope that, you know, that less than meaningful impact in terms of finances would continue and translate over to the local side as well.
Madam Chair, if I could just follow up. So Eric, are you saying that sort of the minimal impact on project costs that you've seen through review of state projects through CoSmart would probably apply at the local level as well?
That's our anticipation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other concerns? Any other clarifications? Silence. Okay. That's I just first of all, I just again want to thank Eric and Lisa and Kate for being on it and explaining this a bit more. I have some more studying and to do myself. Although I get it, I don't get it. I'm a little slow. We'll definitely hold this bill, look through this, review it. So next week, folks, when we look at this again, if there are any questions or concerns or clarifications needed, we can address them at that time and hopefully potentially move the bill or continue to work on the bill as it relates to the fiscal notes and clarification as well as the amendments provided. With that, I do want to say, because we had the three bills, I want I'm going to just pick somebody. Delegate Morgan's bill HB 120. We're probably going to be voting on Friday. So HB 120, I want to ask if Delegate Jay Jacobs was interested in presenting the bill on the floor. And if not, I have a second. Unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah, I'll do.
Oh, thank you. So kind, so hardworking. We thank you so much for your service. And if there are no other questions, concerns, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I see a hand raised second. Good night.